What makes something an STI? Or rather, can we call something a sexually transmitted infection if we're not sure it's sexually transmitted? In 2022, there was a global outbreak of the virus Mpox, spreading far and wide from the countries in Central and Western Africa, where it was known to be endemic for multiple decades. The outbreak was first observed in European countries, and then shortly after, Australia, the US, Asia, and the entire globe. But what was curious about this instance is that the viral outbreaks were traced back to gay male sex parties and other pride events in Europe. When, historically, since its isolation decades ago, Mpox has not been understood as an STI. But the tight association of people who were catching Mpox with sexual activity and the presentation of lesions around oral and urogenital areas called into question the nature of this virus. Once word got out that over 90% of infections were observed among men who have sex with men, the global public health and social media landscapes erupted into discourse. People were scared and wondering who should be monitoring for Mpox. The entire global community had just gone through COVID and was still going through it. Fears were spreading about the possible emergence of another pandemic brought about because of gay sexual promiscuity and infection rates in an African virus. This resulted in a particularly topsy-turvy landscape where some people were advocating for the centrality of Mpox to queer health. Meanwhile, others, including conservative commentators, were calling this a gay disease and blaming men who seemingly couldn't control their sexual appetites even for a little bit to stop its spread. Public health agencies in the US reacted with mixed results. Some people were emphatic that this is not a gay disease and not an STI, and were very worried about these types of discourses increasing stigma and disease burden among sexual minorities. However, other public health activists and members of the general public were saying it was ludicrous to not communicate who the people were who were getting this infection, arguing that by framing it as something anyone could get, we weren't being really technical about the populations most at risk. The thing is, though, it wasn't just men who have sex with men contracting Mpox, and many people who got it didn't contract it through sex. In this article, I analyzed the discursive formations around Mpox during the 2022 outbreak and link these formations in the discrepant framings of Mpox to the actual public health response by the US, with a particular emphasis on New York City, which was one of the key sites of the epidemic. Through collecting and analyzing news articles, social media posts, public health announcements, and empirical biomedical research on Mpox, I show how the outbreak was strongly configured by two competing frames, where on one side, Mpox is a sexually transmitted infection and a gay disease as a result of it, and another side where Mpox was not an STI and not a gay disease, something that anybody should be on the lookout for. In New York City, these debates came to such a head that one of the city's top infectious disease experts was fired from his position over it. And I argue that weakening of the public health response like this really came about because of the public health enterprise's inability to reconcile its capacity to produce stigma and its function as a form of surveillance and protection of population health. In the paper, I show how the category of sexually transmitted infection is as much driven by socio-political considerations as biomedical ones. By shifting our attention away from whether Mpox is an STI or not as a matter of universal ontological fact, but rather a matter of local contestations and vested interests. This paper shows the importance of local and dynamic and community-driven communications around infectious agents, especially as zoonotic viruses and bacteria transfer from animals to humans at an ever-increasing rate in our globalized world.